that they need to take. They all seem to cut corners just a little bit because they have to come in with also within budget. But how many of these nuclear power plants have come close to having meltdowns? We've heard of some of them. I'm sure there's been a lot we haven't heard where they came close to having a meltdown.
Well, they had backups for the nuclear plants as far as if they had to shut them down, and because you got to continually cool them. Even when you shut them down, the rods still had to be cooled, and they used pumps to pump the water in and out and into cooling ponds and pump in the cold water and on and on. Well, that requires electricity to do that. Now you compound that with a possible EMP that hits our country. Could be the Carrington effect like they had in the mid-1800s that knocked out all the telegraph lines. If you had one of those hit our country, we're in no shape to replace those transformers or anything like that, to actually bring electricity back online for months and months and months, possibly 2 years, 2 or 3 years or better. And someone says, oh, well, they got backup generators. They use, gasoline generators to generate electricity. Well, how are you going to get the gasoline if everything is, the generators don't work because the EMP hit it or something? Or the vehicles, you think they're going to still be distilling oil and creating gas at these plants or anything? Or nothing's going to work. And those rods are going to get hot. They're going to blow the top off. You're going to have 130 plus Fukushimas go off our country within a short period of time after an EMP.
Oh, yeah.
That's the bottom line, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah. And, you think about, they got generators. Well, most of these generators are controlled by what? Electronics?
Oh, they'll be fried.
Oh, yeah. And just like people, I had one guy argue with me. It won't affect my car if we have an EMP. Oh, yes, sir. You got a whole bunch of computers. My wife's car, her Mitsubishi 2015 Outlander, a computer module went out of many. They told me there's like 4 or 5 computer modules, into the main computer of that car. That one module only controlled the heater, the air conditioning, the wiper section. $1,183 for that module. Just for the module, not the labor putting it in. Could you imagine we have an EMP? That whole car would be toasted. The computer and all the modules are fried. They're gone. You're not going to start the car. Now, if you were fortunate enough to be a collector and you have a 57 Ford or an Edsel or something else that only has points and you got a coil and you got spark plugs, you know what? You're going to go in there and you're going to turn that ignition key and that car is going to start.
Yeah, I was going to just mention that. It's going to have to be a pre-70s car that doesn't have any of the electronics in it like it does now. And if you're fortunate enough to be a ham operator, if you're fortunate enough to have the old tube-style transmitter receivers, they probably would still work. But that's the other problem. All the equipment now is digital.
Yeah.
It's electronic, and it doesn't use tubes. Unless you had some forethought before something happened to put them in a Faraday cage, and for the listening audience, that is it's a shielding, basically, to keep electronic equipment from being fried by high electromagnetic pulses.
Yeah, kind of like a microwave. You could take a microwave and make one really quick.
That's true, because it has the shielding to keep the microwaves from hitting us, so hence it probably would be pretty good about keeping things from getting inside of it as well. But you have to have a Faraday cage or have these bags that you can special order to put them in, like the smaller radios. But even then, it will be a deplorable situation because it's just going to be rough.
Well, hey, you know what? You know what's going on? You mentioned ham radio. California came up and said, ham radio, the emergency setup, well, all the hams in California, they're saying, you can't use the repeaters anymore. We don't need you anymore. Your technology, a ham radio, is over with. Have you heard that?
Yes, I'm trying to get the story straight. One came from a letter, which, in my opinion, came from an ignorant official that did not realize how important ham radio was to the community. But if there's any truth to the fact that I didn't think they had the authority to tell ham operators they need to pull down repeaters, because I thought the FCC had jurisdiction over all of that.
Well, you just wait, because I've been hearing some rumbles with the FCC, with the commissioner they have now. It's not the FCC that I grew up and you grew up with. You know that.
Oh, absolutely.
And the commissioner now, basically, with the FCC, looks at ham radio as obsolete. And they think about the frequencies that could be open up for commercial value that ham radio operators, which I used to be, is utilizing, and they want to eventually probably take that all away from them.
It's happened. I mean, they took. I've been a ham radio operator since 1976, so I have the highest class license, which is extra at this point. I've had it for almost 20 years, but I've seen the aging of the ham radio population. You go to a meeting, you can't seem to find anybody under 50, and most of them are probably closer to 60 or 70, so that doesn't bode well for the hobby. But you're right. Look what's happened to the TV channels and the upper UHF channels. They're not being used. They're getting sold out to companies. They're actually being negotiated for, or what do you call that? Auctioned. Yes, I'm sorry. I had to think of the word for the second. They're auctioning off a radio frequency spectrum, and they're going to start doing that with the ham radio frequencies, because we got a nice chunk in different parts of the bands and stuff. So
yeah, for now,
down the road.
Yeah, I think in 10 years from now that ham radio will be non-existent, because that's what they're going to come and say, that no young blood is really coming into it anymore. Now, 2 meters, there is a group of people into 2 meters, you know why, and they treat it just like CB, a lot of them, like CB was. But I think what's going to happen is that as the older people die off, there's going to be less people, and they're going to say, well, you don't need all those frequencies. We're only going to give you this little teeny narrow band, and this is what you can operate with on now. That is what I predict is going to happen, and that's scary. And again, you mentioned like with TV bands and all this stuff. Yeah, everything that they can utilize to sell, okay, and license to commercial is going to eat up, all these bands. Just trust me, it's scary. But you know what? Well, technology has changed. The hobbies are changed. When I was young, I would go out and buy parts and build little circuit boards that did things. I would build a little transmitter. I'd build a little radio. I would build all kinds of stuff. People don't do that stuff anymore. Like Radio Shack at one time. Even before Radio Shack, when it was Knight Electronics and Lafayette Electronics, people were buying kits and making stuff. Heath Kit. They would build their own little transmitter and receiver, or TV even, or whatever. People don't do that shit anymore. They don't. So you finding that this type of stuff is dying off now big time. As people my age or older are dying off, they're sitting there and saying, well, we don't need this frequencies out. The amateur band doesn't need it. Because they know how many people are licensed, and they can see it's dropped off drastically in the last 20 years. Plus, let's face it, how many hams out there are fed up because they came and they can't talk worldwide right now. They can talk a few miles because of the lack of the sunspot activity.
Well, that's true. However, there's one other aspect that most people aren't thinking of, is the fact that being a ham operator, using a ham operator is an independent function. I can talk to someone across the country, and yes, sunspot activity is creating a problem for that. But I can freely call someone across the country. I don't have to worry about, aside from following the rules of our license, I don't have to worry about paying someone a fee like with a cell phone or something. We can't use it for business. It's just strictly for communication, for emergencies, or for non-business communication. So I need to make that point clear. But still, I don't have to be regulated through the internet and someone keeping track of who I'm contacting as they do on the internet. The ham radio operators actually have a network that is similar to the internet, but it interconnects stations across the country, independent of the internet. So they're able to share information and what have you. That's the newest craze. They're not so much into the point-to-point talking to each other. But the thing I'm thinking is that the powers that be don't want us to have an independent voice, and especially using ham radio or any other form that allows us to speak a different narrative than what the mainstream media talks about. It's the same story along those lines. So there's a side point to what I feel them trying to suppress it also for that reason.
Well, I think it's a whole bunch of reasons. One is I think it's money issue. I mean, come on. How much is certain bands are going to be worth commercially if there's no amateur radio operator on it anymore? It's going to be worth a lot.
Well, they're waiting for us to die out, basically.
Well, guess what? We are.
Yep.
It's the truth.
It'll be over with.
Yeah. And again, take a look at statistics. How many young people are coming into, there's a amateur radio club not too far from where I live. And it's the same thing. When I was able to get around, I stopped in there one day, and it was all people my age or older. And I hate to say it, some of them were even senile. But the thing is, there was no young people there. No high school students, trying to learn, how to be a ham. No young people in their 20s or 30s or 40s. There were people in their 70s, 80s, and who knows. But anyway, that's the way it's going, and I guess things change. The same way, like Heathkit is no longer around, or Night Electronics isn't around, Lafayette isn't around, and Radio Shack isn't around. Good reasons, isn't it? People have changed, and they gotten lazy. It's called, they go up to a desk, they got a keyboard in front of them, and they got a monitor, and they think they can do everything, and that's their whole life if they're not watching TV.
That's a good one.
Well, come on, James. You know what I'm talking about. You're just as bad as I am.
Yes. No, it's true. You know what? If you can't Google it, people don't even want to hear it. Listen, I grew up inventing stuff, so I get what you're saying. That the art of figuring it out, adapting and overcome, and inventing things is, if you can't Google it, I mean, you can Google anything. They show people in there right to the detail to do everything. Nobody has to figure it out no more, or invent things, or work things out. It's gotten too easy, and it's dumbing us down.
Well, I just know this. My dad invented the solid state ignition that's used in used in all vehicles. But you know what? People, like, again, nowadays, the person who used to go out in their garage and tinker and invent things electronic wise just aren't doing it anymore because they're not into it. As simple as that. Anyway.
Nope.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes with Earl Grey. Again, he's with MUFON. He's a director of one of the investigating groups of MUFON in Southern California. We're going to be talking about some of the reports, what's going on with MUFON, UFO sightings, and all this stuff here for the next hour and a half. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. My name is Gary. I'm the host. James out there, Cohart, and then Sam. And Sam, you'll be back the last half an hour, correct?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Well, everybody. James, you just hang on. I'll talk to you later, Sam.
Yep.
Okay, you take care.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, how things are going technology-wise. It's really scary. You know that, James? It's not like it used to be. Anyway, we're going to go to break. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes.